Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to helping business owners prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your terms. This is the Exit Insights podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates Brownsword, and today I'm talking to Nate Lind. Hey, welcome, Nate, and thanks for joining us. You got a fantastic story to share.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been on both sides of buying and selling, and I'd love to share my insights with your audience.
Great. Hey, Nate, why don't we start? Because I love talking to people who have sold their business, and often they've got a story that, you know, they what they learned so much along the way, and there's so much in that journey of going through an exit that they just didn't anticipate, and that's the reason we started the podcast in the first place, to bring all those stories to light.
Definitely.
So
well,
you had a technology business, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was an e-commerce entrepreneur. I was selling vitamins around the world, and back then, I started this in 2012. There wasn't a Shopify. Amazon wasn't quite the way it is now. It was really hard to figure out like how much money you were making, how much money you were spending on advertising. So I built this reporting system that kind of gave me like a management report. It was like a running P&L that daily was showing me how much I was spending, how much I was making. And I ended up getting approached by the shopping cart that I was connected to, that I was a client of. And as a strategic opportunity, they looked to acquire my technology, and we worked out a deal. And I got a pretty handsome amount of money spread out over a period of time. And that was kind of my first exit. I didn't even know that what I had was going to be worth value to somebody, and they approached me directly. We ended up working out a smooth deal, and then it really kind of wet my whistle for mergers and acquisitions. I'd had experience on the buy side ahead of that. I've looked at buying businesses for a while, but selling it and going through the whole process really encouraged me to take a deeper look at mergers and acquisitions. And then fast forward 5 or 6 years, I became a business broker, and now I assist others doing the same thing.
So the complete circle, so to speak. But you glossed over something that I kind of want to pick on. You were selling vitamins, but the business you sold, they weren't really interested in your product by the sounds of it. They're interested in your technology that you prepared to help you understand and monitor where your business was at. Is that right? What's happened to the vitamin business now? Is that still going, or they just dropped it?
So they only bought the intellectual property related to the software that I built because they were a shopping cart. So they didn't want to get into the mix of like buying and selling product. They didn't have any inventory. They didn't have any warehouses or any of that sort of stuff. I didn't know that what I had with the vitamin entity was of value. It was really kind of a cash flow sort of business. It was a lot of paid media. I had a private label brand. I hadn't privately, contracted or privately formulated my own vitamins. I had basically I was marketing an off-the-shelf vitamin that I was buying from someone else private label. So I just didn't really think that business had an upside to it of an exit value. Come to find out now, they definitely do. I didn't know that back then. I didn't realize that until after I became a broker. So I didn't even bother to pursue an exit for that brand. I had a nice exit with the software. As the business was going well, selling vitamins, I was just cash flowing the business. And then I really just had kind of a change of heart. I wanted to do something different. I had a new passion I wanted to pursue, and that was doing events. I did trade shows for a number of years for e-commerce entrepreneurs. And then that kind of segued into becoming a business broker. So I ended up just moving on to different passions as opposed to exiting the vitamins itself.
But using this as a case study, and forgive me for being analytical here, but I find it fascinating as the business that was running as a complete entity had so many different assets that were valuable, and those different assets would have been valuable in hindsight to different people, and maybe you could have sold 2 or 3 chunks of the business and played and had a lot more fun there, but. I love the fact that you'd built your own software platform. You'd built it to help manage your own business, and we tell the story regularly around to really increase the value of your business, you need systems, you need processes, you need a consistent way of doing things. What you want is predictability. You provided some predictability for your own business. Someone came along and said, "Oh, hang on, that's really nice. We haven't seen anything like that before."
That's exactly what happened. Yeah, the shopping cart, they needed some better reporting. They had a competitor that was gaining ground on them, and they just didn't have, their clients didn't have any way to figure out whether they're making any money or not. So they were losing clients as a result of not having the reporting that they needed to be able to help their clients figure out, are things working or are things not
Yeah.
working? And if your clients can't figure out how to make stuff work and they don't go, like they can't stay in business, your business is going to suffer as a result of that. So you brought up the point about maybe parting things out. Like here, in America, we talk about like parting out a car, so to speak. Like I sold the software. I probably could have sold. I definitely could have if I hit the market right. The cash flow of the vitamin business, and I'm sure we'll get into it at some point, but like the value of these online digital businesses, e-commerce businesses is ongoing cash flow, and they have to be sold when the cash flow is either stable or going up. I had a lot of fluctuations in my business. One year we sold like $36 million. The next year it was like 12, and then it was up and down all over the place. That's really hard to sell. But if you have a business that it's got like a nice kind of stable trend of its sales, and it's going up in particular, if it's going up, it's worth a ton of money if it's at least 2 years old.
Yeah, and it's predictable in that case. So if it's predictable, there's low risk for the buyer. But if, as you say, if it's all over the place, well, then they're going, "What am I buying exactly? I can only value it on the low years, not the high years."
That's exactly right. Buyers in our marketplace, they're looking for businesses that are growing cash flow, and then they will penalize it based on the risk of its lack of cash flow, or if it's all over the place, they'll also penalize it based on a variety of factors. I get into some pretty detailed business valuations as part of my intake process with clients. I'll go through we do all of our valuations are based on a multiple of earnings. We don't do anything that's based on a multiple of revenue. For lower middle market digital businesses, if it's a privately held company and it's under $500 million, it's going to be valued on a multiple of earnings, and then it'll the multiple. I've got 27 factors that I go through, and it's a whole spreadsheet that I'll do with the valuation, and it's got factors that increase the value of it, and then also factors that decrease the value of it that I get into. It gets to be a little complicated, but that's just the way that the M&A market works. For these digital and internet businesses that are under $500 million that are privately owned.
And yeah, and already you're exploding the myth that it's 10 times earning or 5 times earning. It's a fixed number. You've suggested there that you've got a whole lot of factors that influence the multiple number of a business. Because I'm talking to business owners all the time, and in different industries, and they go, "Well, the multiple for my industry is X, whether it be 3, 5, or 30." And I go, "Is it fixed?" And they go, yeah. And I go, "Okay." So yeah, exactly.
It's not fixed. Yeah, anyone who looks at the industry multiple and says that's how much my business is worth, you're really hurting yourself there, because there's two things that'll happen if you mess up the value of your business. If you either shoot too high, then you'll have buyers that just totally ghost you, because the M&A market, it's not like it's not a used car dealership. People don't tend to come in and lowball you, so you can't go like crazy high, ask for $100 million when your business is worth $2 million. They'll just laugh at you. They'll never respond to you or the broker, and that actually hurts my credibility. I won't list businesses for crazy multiples because it jeopardizes my credibility as a professional and a broker to be able to bring deals to the marketplace that can actually get closed. I'm not doing press releases to make somebody feel good about their valuation. That doesn't pay me, so I don't have time for that. And then on the flip side, if you price your business too low, then you're leaving a ton of money at the table, because buyers certainly aren't going to say, "Oh, you're worth more than that, I'll pay you more." That's never happened.
So it's a really fascinating story, because the multiple is just one part of the equation, right? It's multiplying something, and that something is normally a revenue or a profit number. And again, we need business owners to be aware of what the number is that they're multiplying by. because when it's a profit number, is it EBIT? Is it EBITDA? Is it, what's the, the number, and is it adjusted accounts? So, and then once we've got this, let's call it the standard industry multiplier. Well, buyers and sophisticated buyers have a whole lot of assumptions around what's in place in your business, what your business looks like. If you don't have all those things in place, they're going to come in and go, well, it's not that number. You called it discount. I think there's a whole lot of things that are going to bring that multiple down. So this is what you need to do to prepare your business and get it exit ready, so it's ready for someone like yourself to take it to the market and represent it in its best light, I guess.
That's right. And to your point earlier on, you're talking about, is it EBIT? Is it EBITDA? We primarily use seller discretionary earnings. So we're going to take the entire seller benefit. So anything that it could be, we'll add back in, in some cases there's salaries. If they're not working full time on the business, if there's multiple partners, we may be able to add back in, one of the two salaries. If there's any travel expenses, if someone has a lease for a Tesla, like all that sort of stuff, we'll put all of that back in, because we're still working with a lot of smaller businesses that they're using their company for a lot of deductions, and we'll add all that in, and then that will be the base number that we'll use for the multiple. And to your point, we don't usually take an industry multiple. I do a comparable based analysis. So I'm going to look at since we sell 300 of these a year, we've got 3,000 or so to look at. I'll go back and look at, the specific business type that we've sold before in the past, where we were getting offers, what it actually closed at, what the structure of it was. So I can get into all of that. And we hold that information privately. It's actually confidential. We can't share that publicly because of each engagement we have with our clients. Just like, anyone that, is looking to sell, you don't want your information just blasted how much you sold it for. It's like saying how much money you've got in the bank. Come sue me. No, nobody wants that.
Exactly.
So we can't share those specifics, but I can look across the company to see where all of these valuations have occurred and what these closings have occurred. So I'll take the seller discretionary earnings. I will figure out a multiple based on the comparables of what's going on out there. And then the third step is, what capital is the buyer going to bring into the deal, and what does that capital partner assess as a valuation? So there's multiple parts that are moving here, and we will usually list and sell at the multiple based on comparables, but sometimes we have to close at whatever the bank will finance. This is just like real estate. You may list a house for $500,000, but if it only gets appraised for $400,000 and the buyer can only buy it for $400,000, you may have to negotiate, or maybe we've got to come up with something more creative on where's the difference between $500,000 and $400,000. That's kind of how this all plays out in M&A as well.
Well, exactly. A lot of people, they go around and they go, well, here's how to value a business. And there's a lot of academic, technical ways to value a business. But at the end of the day, a business is worth what the buyer pays for it, because that's the cold, hard money they put on the table. And as you say, they can put deals and structures together. So, Nate, you focus on internet, ongoing revenue, technical-based businesses, which are a little different to let's call it the old-fashioned, bricks and mortar type of businesses where everyone's based and they produce a good or a service and a traditional type of business. From a valuation perspective, how different are they to sell? How easier are they? We hear these wild stories of the multiples being 10 times what they are in traditional businesses. Are they easier to sell? Is that true, that the 10 times multiple? What can you tell us?
Let me get into some specifics. Again, it is very unique and individualized per business. A business that's 5 years old, that has 500 clients, that's very diverse in its revenue, that has annual contracts. Let's say they're providing a service like digital marketing, or maybe maybe they have some component of brick and mortar and online. It can be wildly different from a company that's only a year old that's like barely making things going. But generally speaking, some things that we see across the board is we're always valuing the businesses as a multiple of seller discretionary earnings. So that's just the net earnings or net profit of a company, never on the gross revenue of the company. We can later do a calculation to figure out what that is, but it varies wildly. Some cases it may be half a multiple, half half a revenue or gross revenue of trailing 12 months. Sometimes it might be 1.5 or 2. I don't usually see them much over 2 as in terms of a multiple of revenue. But again, if once we get down into a multiple of seller discretionary earnings, it's calculated based on the previous 12 months. So we'll take the previous 12 months of earnings, we'll multiply that, could be anywhere between 1 to 5, maybe 6. If it's under $10 million in trailing 12 months earnings, once you get over $10 million, your multiple goes up. It can go up quite a bit, actually. A lot of our buyers are buying companies that are in the $1 million to $3 million in trailing 12 months seller discretionary earnings, and their goal is to get it to $10 million and then sell it for 8x, 9x of earnings. So that's kind of the goal of a lot of these buyers. Those are some pretty general terms that apply for everybody that's on our marketplace. But when it comes to the specific multiples and valuations and stuff, I have to roll up my sleeves and spend about an hour with the client and talk with them about their business.
Okay.
I was going to mention about the ease of selling them. Sorry, I almost forgot about that. One of the reasons why we sell digital businesses is they're way easier to sell than brick and mortar businesses because there's so many more buyers. We don't have to worry about a buyer that's in London or in New York City. If the business is in London or New York City, you're kind of constrained to a buyer who's right there too, which could be a challenge. So for us, most of our businesses can be run remotely. They have either staff or teams or contractors or infrastructure that can be managed remotely. Especially since the pandemic, so many people started moving to Zoom and using digital interfaces to communicate with their teams. And now the beauty of that is you can transition that business to a buyer that if you're in San Francisco and they're in New York City, it doesn't matter. So they are much easier for us to sell because of that. And because the breadth of the buyer marketplace is massive. We have 175,000 buyers on our email list. Over 1 million buyers, eyeballs looking at our marketplace, our website, our Facebook account, our other social media, and then where we syndicate our listings elsewhere too. So it's big.
So it's a lot easier to sell because you don't have to be in a physical location. You can be anywhere to sell it. It truly is a global market. It is typically an online service, so there's nothing to move. It's just value through the service offering and what have you.
If it's an e-commerce business and there's some infrastructure like a fulfillment center, usually that's outsourced. So a third-party logistics company is moving, like they're receiving shipments from China, Mexico, Vietnam, wherever it is, and then they're picking and packing into smaller boxes and then shipping the smaller boxes out the door. Like that's very easy to transition to a buyer. They want that. If someone's receiving all of their products by pallets, like in their garage at their house, that's a hard one. We have to move that out usually to a third-party logistics company before a buyer would take serious interest.
And scale it up a bit more first, I imagine.
Yep.
Okay. So we've got that. What's the sort of time frame from someone having a nibble, to closing a deal on that sort of industry?
Yeah, they can move pretty quick. So from the time that the business is listed and buyers are expressing interest in it, usually it takes a week or so to formalize a call. I'm doing some pre-screening. We have more buyers than we have sellers, and our market we have a couple of different levels of confidentiality. So the first thing is a buyer has to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Once they've signed that, they'll get an offer memorandum and the financials. In order for them to get a phone call, typically I need to get proof of funds or some more financial information from them. Do they have the ability to actually close on the deal? Once that's been determined, then I'll arrange a call for them. That can take anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on how quick people are communicating back and forth. But from the time that a business is marketed until when we're starting to see offers, can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 or 3 months. And then the due diligence process, I'm sure, is probably similar across the board. If there's an SBA loan or financing, it tends to take a little bit longer. Usually add another month or two to it because of the formality of bank financing and the hoops that the buyer has to jump through. But if there's not financing like that, or if it's a capital partner or lending partner the buyer has a pre-existing relationship with and they can close quickly, we can see deals close as quickly as 45 days to 60 days. But I'd say on average it's probably closer to 90 days to 120 days from offer going live to closing.
So, just on a big generalization scale, that's quite a bit quicker than traditional type businesses that we're seeing and hearing about.
That's my understanding. I think the average, the Association of Business Brokers published something recently about like the average transaction takes about a year. We don't take that long. Ours is probably half that. I'd say 4 to 6 months is more realistic for what we're experiencing.
Okay. So for business owners running an online e-commerce or some sort of online service business, what are some of the mistakes they make when they're starting to think about getting their business to market that you guys see?
The biggest mistake they make is they didn't get their financials sorted out. Like they didn't hire a bookkeeper. I've got a client right now. They've got a $5 million a year business, and they haven't put all their stuff in QuickBooks or Zero. I take that back. They hadn't prepared or sent anything to me until just recently, and now they're saying that they have it. So I'm having to I'm having to search for a needle in a haystack. The number one challenge I have is entrepreneurs get excited about a business. They start making money with the business, and they tend to focus on the money-making aspect of the business, not on the documentation, not on the bookkeeping, and not on the financial records. That is the biggest trip up. That's the biggest landmine most of my clients make. That surprisingly, a lot of them don't do. You have to get your business set up on QuickBooks or Zero or another professional accounting system. You have to have a bookkeeper who is entering every single expense and revenue and itemizing it and categorizing it into your chart of accounts. You have to do it every month. You have to get it updated every month. You have to reconcile it to your bank accounts every month. And then you have to share that with your business broker or your exit planner. And if you're not doing that, you will not sell your business for more than chump change. It's not professional. You're laughed at and mocked behind the scenes, whether you know it or not, by buyers who are like, "What is this idiot doing?" If you can't spend $500 to get a bookkeeper and a CPA and someone to go through your documentation and make sure that you're sorted out, you don't have any business in selling. That's just the ridiculous aspect of it. And I'm sorry to be a hard hitter about that, but I had all the time I'm dealing with this. It's just people who don't have their bookkeeping sorted. That's the number one mistake you can make.
So what you're saying to me, Nate, is the old message of trust me, it does make that much money. What is just not believable? Is that what? Surely you can't.
Not believable at all. You're completely laughed. Most of the time I get ghosted. This is what happens. When I was a newer broker, I took any listing. I was trying to learn to cut my teeth on it. I took some clients who didn't have any records. They didn't have any income statements or balance sheets. And so that's actually standard if it's a little business. If you're talking under $100,000, under $200,000, maybe, you can get away with that, but they're still going to get into your bank statements. They're going to get into all of your stuff, and they have to figure it out. So they're not just going to pay you without verifying this information. But if you want to have a sizable deal, you want $250,000 or more, you want $1 million or more for your business, nobody will trust you on your word. And if they do, take their money as quickly as you can. But I'm telling you, it never happens. Trust but verify is the motto of M&A.
And if we're looking at this from the buyer's perspective, if they're going to part with that much cash, they want to de-risk that as much as possible. They want to verify that the business, if it's producing so much money and profit, because they need to, in most situations, pay back a certain amount of money, and they're looking for a return on investment. They're looking for security. Otherwise, they're just potentially throwing money away at a risk. And it's not about what you do or don't do, Mr. or Mrs. Business Owner. It's just a case of so much money is involved. They need to de-risk that transaction.
Yeah, it's likely they may be willing to do a big number, but it's after you've shown it for a while. So they may buy the business, essentially buy it for no money down, or for, all of the business is going to be sold over time using the cash flow of the business to pay it off. That's where they can get to be a little bit more creative because they have no risk or very little risk. So I see some of those deals happen off our marketplace. We only
Yeah.
represent clients that have established and growing and profitable companies because our commission is based on the cash at closing. We have to take massive discounts for earnouts and other post sale compensation. So I'm a go getter. I want to make money. I want to make my client money. So I'm going to go get a big cash offer for a deal. In order to do that, they need to have a growing business with good cash flow, great fundamentals, and we can get a ton of money for them.
Okay. So we're hearing that one of the big mistakes is they just don't have good records, and records around the financials that can really hold back a deal big time. We talked about the valuation formula, if you like. So yeah, you've got some sort of revenue profit number and you've got a multiple. It's pretty obvious what we can do is we can cut expenses and we can increase the revenue and we can adjust the profit. That's one way to influence and increase the valuation of the business. We talked about things. We talked about the M side that a buyer would expect to have in place, and there's no such thing as a standard M. What are some of the things, Nate, in your experience, that can really have a significant influence on increasing the multiple? Because that's what the listeners are really interested in.
Yeah.
But also some of the things that they really must get right, so that M, that average M, if you like, average multiplier, is not discounted. What are the things that are going to rip the value out of your business?
Some big ones that are value adds is if the client satisfaction for whatever the service or the product, if it's like outstanding, if you have advocates of the business, whether it's a physical product or if it's a service, you could really do yourself a lot of good by having great reviews, having great branding, having great awareness in the world about it, where people are raving about it, and vice versa. It can really hurt you if clients absolutely hate what it is that you're putting out into the universe. In fact, that's usually a deal breaker. If someone Googles you and the first thing on Google is a customer, some hate on you, some internet hate on you, chances are you're not going to close the deal. You need to spend some time, curating your reputation online, or really, doing a great service or having a great product, so people will believe in you. Daryl, I got distracted for a second. Remind me, what was the second part of your question?
What are the things we're talking about? The things that can really have a big boost on the M side and rip the value out of your business.
Transitioning. So having a transition team, having support for the business long term. Remember, buyers want the cash flow that you've represented to them, and they want that to grow. They want it in the exact same way it was made before they had their hands on it. So if you've got some staff or you've got infrastructure in place, they want to take the business exactly as it is, with no interruptions or no changes. This isn't a Hollywood story where the Bobs come in and all of a sudden fire everybody and then expect to keep the business going the way that it was before. And we're not public deals where there's like 10,000 employees. Yeah, that's not what's happening here. They want the staff that's making the money, to transition over. If you as the business owner are doing the bulk of the work, you better plan to be an employee at least for 6 to 12 months with the new buyer, and then to transition and delegate whatever it is that you're doing to them. And you can definitely do yourself a service by delegating out your responsibilities ahead of a sale. So I'd recommend that you spend some time delegating and having the infrastructure supporting the day in and day out aspects of the business, which looks really, really good to a buyer, so that they can take over the business, assuming what has transpired for the last 6 to 12 months can continue to do so, and no beats are missed. So it can, just like a drum beat, can continue to cash flow every month. Those are a couple of big ones: customer satisfaction and transition team. And then lastly, I keep harping on it, increasing your cash flow. If you're profitable and you continue to grow your profit, that is the number one de-risking factor in why businesses get a larger amount in their sale. If you grow your business from $1 million in profit a year to $2 million in profit a year, when you multiply that by 4 or 5, that is a huge increase in exit value. That's not just doubling. You're getting an exponential return on that $1 million increase.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the same principles, and I guess just applied slightly differently. We need that predictable revenue. If the revenue or income or profit, however we're measuring it, profit ideally is predictable, and the forecast, which suggests the forecasts are reliable based on proven performance. We need clients, loyal clients, to be coming back and raving about us. We need that systemized approach, and the management team doing a lot of the work and demonstrating that the business isn't reliant on the owners being there, got their hands in, working in the operations. We need a brand. We need our access to the marketplace, and have that good brand reputation, and the systems and platforms to continue to be able to scale the business. We get these things in place, and the valuation increases by the sounds of it, just
It
like
really
anything.
does. Yeah, the M&A is not too sexy. Like if you're starting to use AI and like that's your new thing, and if anything, it actually brings mistrust from a buyer. They don't like that your business is using the latest and greatest technology. They don't like that it's like cutting edge. They want to see the fundamentals of the business. They want to see fundamental cash flow. They want to see growth. They want to see all of the things that the Rockefellers did, and what Vern Harnish preaches about, what Gino Wickman talks about with traction and scaling up and all those sorts of things. They want the very basic business fundamentals. And Daryl, I'm sure what you focus on with your service is helping people, just get the bones of their company strong, give it like the everything that it needs to be able to grow and to survive and to thrive. Not necessarily what's the newest gimmick, what's the newest fad technology, what's going to lead the company to a little blip in sales. That's not what's going to really make a buyer salivate over the deal. They want to see a strong business. But that being said, we sell a lot of one-man shop companies where it is only one person. And that's often for a $1 million, $2 million, $3 million business. There may not be staff. There may be no staff. It could just be the owner and then some contractors or some virtual assistants. And we sell those all day long. But the key is they've started to figure out how to delegate, and they are willing to ride through the transition and the transaction with the buyer for 6 to 12 months to make sure the buyer can sit in their shoes when they step out of it.
Yeah. So in your experience, Nate, so you've described what I would call an earnout or a transition period where they don't get all the money up front, because there's a certain amount of risk involved for the buyer. They'll say, "I'll give you a bit up front, and over the next 6 or 12 months, we'll give you the rest of the money, and we'll make sure how much of that revenue or profit sticks, and we'll risk it that way around." In your experience, how many of the businesses that you sell end up with some sort of earnout arrangement, and how many of the businesses do pretty close to a complete transaction right up front?
Almost all of them have some post-sale compensation. Almost none of them have 100% cash at closing. Now we have my average is about 70% of the enterprise value. Like let's just say it's $1 million deal. 700,000 of that would be cash at closing if it meets the average of what I've done over the last several years, and 300,000 might be some post acquisition compensation. And I like to arrange those as a seller note, so it's like a guaranteed payment, much like seller
Yeah.
financing when you sell a house. If I can't get the buyer to agree to that, then I want to try to figure out something else that's like it's nearly guaranteed for my
Yeah.
client, but also lets the buyer de-risk it in some way. I'm not a big fan of a traditional earnout where it has to grow by 20 or 25%. And if it does, then you get the $300,000. There's so many factors outside of everyone's control. There's market dynamics, there's supply chain issues, there's all sorts of things that could be outside of the control of both the seller and the buyer. Both seller and buyer have to mutually be goal oriented for the long-term success of the business. If the seller is looking to just cash out and disappear, it's probably not going to sell. If a buyer is looking to acquire it and like run it into the ground, the seller is probably not going to want to sell it. People can detect this in conversations. When you have dozens of conversations over the course of 3 or 4 months, you'll feel it out. So to answer your question, yeah, we've got the majority of our transactions have some post-sale compensation, and I will work with my client to structure it in a way that is as near guaranteed as possible, while
Yeah.
also giving the buyer some allowance for flexibility around risk factors.
I like that structure. It's, sometimes over here in the UK we talk about deferred payments, but we're effectively de-risking it for both parties. But there's, some of the earnouts where the owners have to work in the business for 2 or 3 years and perform and meet all sorts of criteria. You know, there's a lot of risk still on the founder of the business. So they take the risk of building the business, and then they've still got ongoing risk post transaction. To me, that's the very definition of not exiting on your terms. If we get the business prepared, we get it structured, we set it up right using all of the principles that you've shared today, you've got all of your financials under control, it's a boring business, it's predictable, there's a certain amount of certainty around it, then it's going to be easier to sell. And the big bonus to the founders or the owners of the business is that there may be some deferred payments, but there's minimal risk attached to that.
That's exactly right.
You've
Yeah.
done everything you can. So I love that. So Nate, we've talked about some of the good things, what we can do to prepare the business to get it exit ready, some of the things we want to avoid that would reduce the price. Let's assume we've got, everything is in check, is in place. What are some of the things that can happen during the negotiation stage that can kill a deal that you guys see?
Yeah, a big one is hiring the wrong attorney. If you've got a friend who is, they are quote unquote an attorney, but they're not a M&A, a deal or transaction attorney, that's the wrong person to have sitting in the seat to get through legal. Some things that can come up as well is not being flexible around reps and warrants. So you're going to, as a seller, you're going to make representations and warranties that your taxes have been paid, your sales if you're selling e-commerce, you've been paying sales tax in all the right municipalities. You're going to make representations that there's no litigation. There's a variety of things that you're going to make representations that the buyer needs to have assurances that you're true to your word before they can take over the running of the business and not have to worry about all of that. And sometimes this can get sticky, but fortunately, there's some pretty fancy reps and warrants insurance now for these lower middle market and small business deals that can take some of the onus off of this part that can get a little bit antagonistic, because a seller or a buyer may say, we want to hold 10 or 20% of the deal for a year in escrow and then pay it out because we don't know, we don't believe, we don't have faith that everything that you said is true. And now you can go and for I think it's like $20,000 per million, you can get reps and warrants insurance and not have to suspend that $1 million or whatever it is for a year. I'd much rather spend or forfeit or pay for 10 or 20 grand, and usually I can negotiate the buyer and seller to split it so that you can get the full amount of money that you were thinking you're going to get due at closing instead of waiting another year for it and making that yet another deferred payment on top of the 30% of deferred payments maybe that you had negotiated from the get-go.
So skimping on, I guess, expertise around helping you with this, usually most significant transaction of your life.
Yeah. For every client I've interviewed over the last, all but one, over the last several years, my exit with them, this has been the biggest liquidity event of their life. One has had a significant amount of experience, and he sold a division of his company, and this wasn't the biggest deal that he had, but is darn near close. So yeah, this is probably the biggest transaction of your life up to this point. Hopefully not the last, but when you get to this point, it's just, think to yourself, if you have, a $250,000 Lamborghini that you're selling and something's wrong with the engine and you take it to Jiffy Lube to have them change the oil and not truly assess the engine and take care of it in a delicate way and make sure that it's properly maintained, you are going to have a world of hurt later if someone were to acquire that and not think that they got what they were expecting and come back hunting you with a lawsuit.
Yeah, that's a good example. Nate, look, you've shared a lot of knowledge. Look, one of the things I ask all the guests on the show is we've covered a lot of ground in the last 30 minutes or so. What's the highlight? What's the key message you would love listeners to take away from your tips today?
I was an entrepreneur. I've been a serial entrepreneur for 20 years, and it wasn't until my children challenged me with, Dad, why am I spending so much time working? Why aren't we spending more time hiking? Why aren't we camping? Why aren't we spending more time together? Where I realized that I really need to make a change in my life. And I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I wanted passive income. I wanted, cash flow to get me out of the rat race. And here it is, 15 years later. I wasn't working a job. I had made my own job, and I reported to myself and I reported to every client that I sold a vitamin to. And I had built a tremendous amount of time and effort around this and was working 60, 70 hours a week. And it was at that kind of gut wrenching moment that I realized that I became an entrepreneur because I wanted more freedom. I wanted more freedom of time and also the wealth to be able to enjoy that time to go and do fun things with my loved ones. So I would encourage anyone that's listening to this to remember, why did you become an entrepreneur in the first place and what's going to get you there? I'll challenge you to think that an exit of your business is probably, if not the most monumental opportunity for a liquidation event in your life that you can then use for passive income. You can invest in real estate. You can take advantages of the market fluctuations. It could be the financial markets, cryptocurrency, whatever it is that is your juice, your passion. You can use that on your second iteration of making millions that I would encourage you to be thinking about. But I can tell you, you will not get the time and the value and the freedom of spending all of your waking moments with your loved one when you're running your baby, your heart and soul, your business 60, 80 hours a week. So that was true for me, and I think that would resonate with some of your audience members. And if you're in that situation and you want to know how much your business is worth, I'd love to tell you how much it's worth.
Brilliant. And yeah, remember why you started it. I love that, Nate. Thank you so much for sharing your exit insights with us today.
Thanks, Daryl.